Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Karen Tino, and today we're going to do a house that has a pretty tragic backstory. In fact, it's tragic enough that I'm not going to get into the details. I can tell you the basics, which is there was cancer, there was severe hoarding disorder, there was a death in the family, and then after that there was a collapse in the household, financially, emotionally. When the surviving family ended up leaving the house, this is the condition they left it in, and believe me whenever I tell you that the downstairs is much, much worse. The reason you're seeing subfloor here is because most of this place was carpeted and it was so stained and saturated with pet urine and pet feces that they had to rip out all the carpets just to be able to even enter this place. Because of that, nothing will be saved, nothing will be donated. The owner said they'd rather just toss it all, so that's what we're going to do. Keep in mind that before we ever got in here, somebody else had tried to clean this place up before they just gave up and said this is way beyond our capabilities. So this was cleaned into this condition. It was actually much, much worse before we came in. Now, the first part of this is the easiest part mentally, but the most difficult part physically. It's just picking up everything and throwing it away. The second part, which you'll see later in this video, is me cleaning the place, and that takes a lot more mental effort, but it's really impressive how good this place turned out, even in the condition that it's in. The house itself is really, really nice. It just needs a lot of fixing up, new flooring, new appliances. The cabinets were in incredible condition, so were the countertops. From what I can tell, just from taking all this stuff out to the dumpster, it looked like the mom of the house had the hoarding disorder, and it looked like nobody else in the house really cleaned. And one of the ways that I can tell that is because the hoard was all stuff like clothes, women's shoes, a lot of dolls and stuffed animals, romance novels, but I think that it was kept clean probably by her because she's the one who passed away, and the dirt that was on everything hadn't been there that long. So to me, it appears that she was hoarding, but she kept it clean. Then after she passed, the rest of the family didn't clean, and then the dirt and grime started building up from that point. I actually run into this quite often in the Midwest where I work, where the families take on traditional family roles. So the mom ends up staying at home and taking care of the kids in the house. The husband works and brings home the money. Then if either of them pass, the other one devolves into chaos, because if the husband passes away and he's the one providing the money, the wife is often at a loss as to how to make up for that loss. And the opposite, if the wife passes away first, then the husband has gone most of his life not even knowing basic home economics. So one area for each of them devolves into chaos, and then the household just collapses. Now, that's not the way with every household. That's just the way for the households that I've seen that have needed this type of help. So I'm seeing worst case scenarios, but I see that dynamic happening over and over again with the people I help. Another thing that makes me think that this mess was recent as far as the grime and dirt is because there were no bugs and no rodents, no mice. It had a little bit of mice poop in one of the kitchen drawers and in one of the bedroom closets, but this is a house that's way out in the country surrounded by cornfields, and that's to be expected. It doesn't matter how clean you are. When you live out in the country in Illinois, you're going to get mice. But there were no roaches, no mice. The place wasn't infested with spiders. I only saw 2 live moose, but those are easy to just shoo off. But other than that, there was nothing that made me believe that this house was in such a filthy condition that it got infested. Now, one of the reasons that it may not have had mice in it is because there were definitely cats in this house, because this place was covered in cat poop. But at a bare minimum, usually a house that's in this condition will at least have roaches, and the fact that it didn't have any leads me to believe that this hadn't sat that long in this condition. Usually the longer it sits, the more vermin you get in the house. It also hadn't sat long enough for there to be the common problems that I run into, which is bad plumbing, bad electrical, floors caving in, cabinets with rotten bottoms. The toilet and the bathtub are completely trashed, and they're going to have to be swapped out, so I didn't even bother cleaning the toilet. It's just one solid mass of black, and that's a combination of hard water deposits and black mold. But I mean, outside of that, there wasn't really much damage to the house at all. Between the back of the bathroom door, one of the bedrooms, and the garage, we found somewhere around 150 pairs of shoes, maybe 200. We don't even know how many there are downstairs, but we estimated that if it's anything like the upstairs, by the time we're done, we will find anywhere from 200 to 400 pairs of shoes. Between the first bedroom that we clean and the garage, we found at least 100 dolls and stuffed animals, and we haven't even seen underneath the pile in the garage yet. So that could also jump up around 400 to 500 dolls by the time we're done. Downstairs, there's so many romance novels that cover the floor, I couldn't even put a number on it. I found at least 50 fingernail clippers and around 50 pairs of scissors. We also found 5 portable and window air conditioning units, and again, we haven't even looked outside in the garage yet to see if there's more. So again, it's not a place that was full of a lot of filth, it's just a massive amount of stuff. And keep in mind, this is what was left. This doesn't even count what they took whenever they left the house. Now, we have no contact with the previous occupants. However, we still keep our eyes out for any expensive items or any important paperwork. So far, we haven't found anything like that, but if we do, we're just going to set that stuff aside, contact the current owners, and then have them relay that information to the previous occupants. And that's just out of respect. I mean, legally, we could throw away all this stuff and not get in trouble, but legal is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for respect, not just for the previous owner, but for the current owner as well. That's one of the reasons you won't see us bust out a shovel and just start going to town and just chucking everything we can as fast as we can. Anytime I clean up a place that's this cluttered and this hoarded, I always go through it by hand just in case. So that means that every purse that's thrown away, we look through them all to make sure there's no cash, no important documents. But also, whenever we go through all the books, when we get downstairs, we'll be flipping through all the pages, because it's often the case with hoarding disorder that they will stash money, just cash, inside of books. I've heard many stories over the years of people finding thousands of dollars just stashed away, just squirreled away inside everything from books to photo albums to just random magazines. Let's talk about donations for a minute, because in all these videos that I do, I usually have a pretty sizable amount of people who get mad or at least get upset that we're not donating a bunch of items. This is typically coming from people who live in bigger areas than what we live in, bigger cities, and the methods of donating are much easier in a bigger city compared to the towns that we have around here that in some cases have a couple hundred people in them. So for instance, in my area, we have, I think, one place that we can donate called the Silk Purse, and that mainly deals in clothes and a little bit of odds and ends, things like pots and pans and pictures. It's a very small place. There are some churches in the area that will take donations and then divvy out those to people in need. But the places that we donate to are often picky about what they receive, because it's such a small area that whenever people donate a lot of stuff to them, they end up just having to store those things, or they just have to throw them away the same way that we're doing right here. So the problem that we run into is twofold. First is a method of getting those items to the places that need them. I drive a 2-door car, and the places that take the donations won't come and get them, especially when they're out this far in the country. So you have to wrangle up somebody with a truck and usually a big trailer in order to get that stuff to the donation centers. However, the bigger issue is time. My time is finite because I'm doing this for free, because the people who need my help need the help. They're in way over their head. They don't have the resources that I have, and they don't have the skill level that I have in order to get rid of this stuff in a timely manner. I do have that skill level. I do have that knowledge. However, I'm doing this in exchange for the right to film it. So I do this cleanup as much for myself as I do for other people. And the other thing that I do for myself is the video thing. I'm autistic. This is a thing I like to do. It's my special interest. In order to have one video up per week, it means I have a week with the house. Donating this stuff, even if we get past the hurdle of being able to get it to the places and we get people to pick it up and we have people that handles all of the stuff we're going to donate, which is almost impossible in my area to begin with, that process triples or quadruples the amount of time that we have to spend in these places, because now we're sorting objects. We're figuring out what can be donated, what can't. We're trying to put them in groups, so all clothing goes in this group group, and we have to package everything up, put everything in bags and tubs and boxes. We have to check to make sure there's no bed bugs or roaches or mouse poop on any of it. And I agree with the people who say, I hate that all this ends up in landfills, but unfortunately, this is the product of hoarding disorder. This is the conclusion of it. When someone with hoarding disorder passes away, they leave this mound of stuff that is oftentimes broken and damaged and sometimes toxic, and the only thing that you can do with it is just throw it in a dumpster. It's an unfortunate reality that we deal with on pretty much every house that we clean. Well, why don't you just nope. I've done somewhere around 200 of these houses. There is no why don't you just to any part of this. If we had a team of people, that would be different. We could have a team that's meant for just donations and a team that's just for cleaning, but this is just me and my oldest son doing what we can with the time that we have. We just simply can't take a week-long job and turn it into a month-long treasure hunt. Now, that's not to say that we never donate, because we do donate in a lot of these houses. When we can, we do. But unfortunately, this is just not one of those places it all has to go. Though, to be perfectly honest, and I hope you'll forgive me for this, but I kept a paper towel holder from this house and a magnetic turtle. I know that puts me in a position of immorality in some of your minds, but sometimes temptation just is too much to withstand. I'm not apologizing for it. From this angle, this kitchen doesn't look that bad. Up close, it's much, much worse than what it looks from far away. And the cabinets and countertops look really, really good from this position, but wait until I get up close to them. The cabinets themselves were kept in really great condition. I think those were cleaned before we came in, because there's no way they could be that clean compared to, say, the refrigerator and the dishwasher, which are both just absolutely caked with grime. But again, that's a testament to how clean the house was kept at one point in time, because it's not been dirty long enough to do damage. I'm still blown away that all the doors worked on the cabinets, because I think this is the only place we've ever worked that didn't have broken countertops or cabinet doors or shelving. And that made it so much easier for me, because then I could just wipe them down and we're good to go, rather than having to hold on to one while it dangles like a loose tooth. The closets have carpet and the other bedroom has a carpet. So before I use a vacuum on that, I'll use a shop vac to suck up all the large things, because if I just go in there with a vacuum, it's going to destroy the vacuum. If you're ever cleaning up a house that's this messy, use a shop vac first, or this sucks, but if you don't have a shop vac, pick up all the large items by hand, like little pieces of paper, paper clips, rubber bands. You'll often find a bunch of coins scattered across carpet in an old abandoned bedroom. Get all that stuff up first and don't mess up your vacuum. Shop vacs can handle it, regular vacuums can't. If you haven't done it yet, now would be an awesome time to subscribe. And if you didn't do it whenever I said now the first time, then now would be an awesome time to subscribe. As of the recording of this narration, we have 717,000 subscribers, and the only thing I've ever asked in return for this channel is the gold plaque, which happens at 1 million subs, and we should have that by this summer if things keep growing the way that they're currently growing. If we never get it, so be it, but I think it would be super cool for me to have that and for my kids to not have it. That way I could show it to them and they can all cry and wish they had it, but they can't, because I have it. What you're looking at in these two pictures is one of the biggest hoarded garages that I've cleaned out. Forewarning, it gets kind of nasty at the end. Not gross, like you're not going to puke or anything. But at its worst, some of these piles were as tall as me, and I'm 6'4". This is actually week 2 of working on a month-long project clearing out a severely hoarded house. So far, we have gone through 5 40-yard dumpsters. We will likely go through 5 more before it's done. It's by far the most amount of garbage that we've ever removed from a house. It's the most amount of dumpsters that we've ever had to use in a cleanup. It's absolutely massive. Now, as far as the garage, there are multiple factors that went into making it look the way you're seeing. It was a combination of severe hoarding disorder, consistent neglect, which does happen in a lot of garages. Hell, my garage has gotten pretty bad. Not this bad, but it's gotten pretty bad before too. Because you just kind of set stuff out there and then forget they exist. or ignore it. Combined with a case of this nasty furniture has to go somewhere because we're replacing it and we don't really have a place to dump it because we live in the country. So let's just chuck it out into the garage and worry about it later. I think that's the scientific term for that part of the disorder. And you can see that because there was a full couch, a love seat, a recliner, or not a recliner, but just a regular giant seat, a chair, a butt table, whatever you want to call those. There were several end tables, several pieces of old furniture like sewing tables and end tables. There was a coffee table and a kitchen table and chairs. Those were all just kind of chucked into one big pile, but they were thrown on top of a whole bunch of other garbage, which is what made this pile so enormous. What we're going to do is start on the easiest part, which was still extremely difficult, and work our way toward that furniture. That way we don't try to pull a couch off the top of that and end up causing a trash avalanche and end up getting hurt. Now, to start this out, we're going to move kind of slow. You're going to see us picking up handfuls of items and sometimes just like one item in each hand. Part of that is Jason has ADHD, and that's kind of the way he operates to begin with. I have never been diagnosed with ADHD. I am autistic. I'm sure I have ADHD qualities, or whatever you call them, infestations. I have slight parasitic ADHD, if you will. And you will. Oh, you will. Anyway, part of that is we know that everything beyond the first layer of trash is going to be unsalvageable because there's a whole bunch of pet urine, mouse poop and mouse pee. There's a bunch of rotted food and rotted pet food. But if we happen to find any really important paperwork, like a will or a deed to land, we want to make sure that we save those, but they're not going to be saved beyond the first layer of trash. So we're being a little bit careful in what we pick up, and then we're also kind of getting bulky items out of the way too. So we may grab a handful of stuff and throw it away, but we're also going to grab as many pre-packaged trash bags as we can. And in almost every trash bag that you see us picking up, it's filled with dolls and stuffed animals, and that's going to be a running theme that you see throughout this whole house. This house also had another thing that we find in many hoarder houses, which is an absolute overload of crafting supplies, but no sign of actual crafted items. So thread, yarn, looms, cross-stitching stuff, but there's no sign that any of that was actually used. It was more like it was just collected from estate sales and yard sales. Then it all went into a box or a tub or a bag and just got shoved into a corner. And just like every hoarder house we'd ever done, there were hundreds and hundreds of magazines. I don't know what the deal is, but every house that has hoarding disorder in it also has a massive amount of magazines. Now, for the most part, everything's just going to go straight into the dumpster. Like 95% of everything is going away. However, there are some things that you can't put in a dumpster, and I don't know if that's just Illinois regulations or if it's a federal thing. But for instance, there are 3 or 4 CRT TVs in this garage, and we're not allowed to put those in there. Anything with a compressor, so a refrigerator, air conditioning units, your mom. Most PC towers can't just be chucked because I think part of that is that they contain a certain amount of mercury. I don't know, I may just be pulling that out of my butt. Sometimes I pull PC towers out of my butt. But also there's a certain amount of gold in each of those on, I think it's the motherboard, I can't remember. I'm just going off of things that I've heard, so I should probably research that so I'm not just bald-faced lying to you. But anyway, regardless of the reasons, you can't really throw PC towers into a dumpster. Sometimes people do it and they don't care. We try to stick to the rules because we deal with this dumpster company a lot, which is JBL out of, I think it's Indianapolis. Big shout out to them. They are a fantastic company. If you're in the Indianapolis area or pretty much anywhere in Indiana, they're a fantastic company to work with. You can't throw away any paint cans that still have paint in them. If the paint is exhausted because it works so hard, son, then you can throw those cans in the dumpster. Otherwise, you got to find some sort of Home Depot or some sort of store that deals in paint that can help you get rid of them. And you also can't throw in anything that's got oil or gas in it. So not just gas or oil cans, but lawnmowers. They can't go into a dumpster unless they're completely dry, and even then it's kind of a 50-50 chance on whether they're going to give you crap or not. So respecting the rules, we don't do that, but also out of respect to the dumpster company, because I don't want them to be dealing with stuff that wasn't supposed to be going into a dumpster anyway, and they have have their reasons for not putting those in a dumpster. I don't want to disrespect the company or the people who are handling this refuse. Now, that being said, there are going to be some things that go into the dumpster that are iffy. So, for instance, broken glass. If I have to put broken glass into a dumpster, I typically try to box it up so that it's contained. I don't like to put broken glass just out in the open because you never know if it's going to fly out of the dumpster while it's being transported. You don't want people to dump that stuff into a landfill or wherever it goes, and then somebody gets injured from broken glass. I try to be careful whenever I'm putting anything that can be dangerous into a dumpster. It's why instead of just throwing live moose or live barking, snapping wolves into a dumpster when I find them in a garage like this, I just shoo them out and set them free. Otherwise, when they dump all this stuff into a landfill, they can shoot out of there like a moose geyser and attack whoever's closest. And that happens all the time. I just refuse to be a part of that. I don't want to be liable for moose geyser attacks. Hey, while we're watching us do this, let me shout out some channels, especially some old school channels that I haven't called out in a while. For those of you who have been around the channel for a long time, these are going to be things that you've heard before. But for people who are new to the channel, there are a group of cleaning channels that I really love to watch. I watch all these that I'm about to mention. And if you like my channel, you will most likely like these. I said like a whole lot just then. But after you subscribe to my channel, these people could also use your subscriptions because they're just fantastic channels. The first is probably my favorite YouTube channel in general. It's called Feral Tradwife, and it's ran by a woman named Beth, who is one of the funniest people I've ever met, but she's also slightly crazy, and she happens to be one of my best friends. We've become very good friends over the past year or so. So we have a very big brother, actually, let me rephrase that, little brother and much, much older sister dynamic where we give each other crap nonstop. So if you haven't been around the channel, you would think that we just hated each other, but we just like giving each other crap nonstop. So anyway, if you ever hear me make a joke about Beth on this channel, Feral Tradwife is who I'm talking about, and you'll totally understand it once you see her channel. It's hilarious in every way, and it's wonderful. She deserves your subscription like right now or now. The next is an old school channel that I've called out a lot. It's called Fife Free Cleaning. They're out of Fife, Scotland, and they do what I do, where they clean really extreme houses for free, but their narration is great because it's two really good friends just sitting down after they filmed all the footage, and they just talk to each other kind of free-flowing, just like friends, and it feels so good to just turn their video on and sit back and feel like you're in a room with your own friends listening to them joke and cut up and just be great people. All the links to these, by the way, are in the description of this video. The third is Clean with Barbie. Barbie has been a friend of mine for quite a while. I haven't called her out in ages, but she does some of the most extreme houses you will ever see. But if you want to see some absolutely crazy houses transformed in mind-blowing ways, Clean with Barbie is one of the best channels to see that. And the last is A Beautiful Mess. That's ran by a woman named Bonnie, and she's just like, imagine your nicest, most lovable aunt. I don't know why I describe her that way, but it fits in my family where you've got this really nice, lovable, personable aunt that you just want to hug all the time. And that's Bonnie. She has the same flavor of autism as me, but she also has ADHD. But she uses that almost like a superpower and focuses, like really hyper focuses on some of the best organizational type videos you'll see. She does a lot of cleaning too, but her strength is in organization, and it is fantastic to watch her do her thing. But if you can drop by their channels, give them a quick hey, let them know we sent you over there, and then give them a subscribe. That would be awesome. I was really interested in the shelving units that you'll see in the background here because they were all loaded with food, and the Hoard was packed so tightly against that and so tall that it was evident that nobody could get to those for a really long time. So I was interested to see what was the oldest food we could find in there because we knew it had to have been years. Because a hoard like this doesn't just happen overnight. That's built up over a long amount of time. The oldest food that we found in those cabinets was 2009 for an expiration date, which meant they bought them in 2008. Because typically you'll buy something, it's got about a 1-year expiration date on it, and people don't typically buy food at the expiration date. So we knew that it was bought about a year beforehand. So you're talking about 2008 that food has been sitting in there. And for us older people, that doesn't sound like that long ago, but understand that's 17 years that that's been sitting there. We're positive that there was older food because as you go down the shelving units, the older the cans look, and most of them are so old that they've rusted through, so you can't even see an expiration date. I would assume that from the age of those cans compared to what was in the shelves above it, you're probably talking about 2000 or very early 2000s, so I think a lot of the food on the bottom shelves have been there at least 20 years. And you can also tell that they bought in bulk because they wouldn't just have one bottle of Italian dressing, they would have 6. They would have 5 or 6 bottles of barbecue sauce, 15 cans of fruit cocktail, 12 packages of dried moose face, and strangely, just 1 can of Spam. Now, mentally, this is the easiest cleanup that we can do because everything just goes into a dumpster and we don't have to deal with the people who have hoarding disorder. So we don't have to argue about keeping things that we think are just pointless and without value. And we don't have to worry about trying to store stuff that clearly should be thrown away. We just scoop it all up, toss it in a dumpster, and then that's that. But unfortunately, physically, it's the hardest cleanup that we do because we're making 100 or more trips to the dumpster. And even if that's close, we're walking several miles per day, oftentimes carrying trash cans or trash bags that weigh 100 plus pounds. So I can tell you that by the time we were done with this, both Jason and I were absolutely exhausted. I slept like a rock, and then I just realized after I said that rocks don't sleep. So I slept like something that sleeps really well. Whatever that is, that's how I slept after we got done with this stuff. I slept like a professional sleeper, like a performance artist whose job is just to sleep. So far, we've cleaned the main floor and the garage, and this is actually one of the worst parts of the whole house. This is the downstairs. You can tell by these opening pictures that this place is pretty trashed. So in this video, instead of just trash removal, you're going to be seeing a whole lot of actual cleaning. The place is really grimy, really cruddy, and when you see the shower, it'll blow your mind. It'll blow your mind straight on out of your head, son. You'll be sitting there thinking, I sure am glad I have a mind, and then when you see that shower, it'll be like, foont, and then your mind will just shoot right out of your ear. You'll basically end up as Beth from Feral Tradwife. The first room that you're going to see is a bedroom that I think was actually more like a family room to begin with, but this house has like 3 family rooms. The house is enormous. So right off the bat, before we get into the actual cleaning, we have a ton of trash to pick up. By the end of this video, we have taken out about 6 40-yard dumpsters worth of trash from the garage, the upstairs, and then this floor. By the time we're done, we will go through 10 total 40-yard dumpsters. Because nobody lives here and because there's nothing of real value in this place, we're throwing everything away except for the bedroom suit. Sweet ass bedroom suit. There's a bed frame, 2 dressers, an armoire, and 2 nightstands that all match, and they're very, very good quality, so we're going to polish those up and make them look like new, because as of right now, they look totally destroyed. Even Jason thought, I didn't think those things were going to be able to be saved until you got them cleaned up. So we'll get to that here in a bit. Right now, it's just trash, and more trash. So far, we have found somewhere around 2,000 romance novels. We're up to somewhere around 500 pairs of shoes, and there's way more. There's more women's clothing in here than just about any other place that we've ever cleaned. It's just a massive amount. So much that you can't even get to some of the clothing because there's clothes piled up on the floor and blocking access to the better clothes that are hanging in the closet. We also found 5 or 6 phones, which is something we actually find a lot in hoarded houses. And I think there's one of 2 things going on there. Either one, they upgrade their phone and then they just toss the other one in the pile, or 2, they've lost their phone and then it ran out of battery charge, so you can't just call it to find out where it's at, so it just stays lost in the hoard forever and they just have to get a new phone to replace it. We also always find 5, 6, 7 iPads that are just buried in the refuse. Most of the drawers and most of the furniture were just saturated in mouse poop, so we will be wearing masks through most of this cleanup, especially once I get into the bathroom. And you know a place is bad whenever I'm doing the video wearing gloves through every shot. Typically, I don't wear them unless I absolutely have to, mainly because I'm autistic and gloves feel extremely weird on my hands. And I know that's dumb because that's a kind of a detriment to my health by not wearing them. But, you know, it's my decision. I'm 51, man. I can risk my own health if I want. But on this one, I was like, nope, we're putting on the gloves. This is gross. You know the little trash bin bins that you use for personal use for like your own house, the one you take to the curb. We filled probably 5 of those with just random makeup. And there was so much candy everywhere. I bet I filled 4 40-gallon trash bags full of candy. And then I also had to spend a little bit of time looking up the value of certain dolls because there was a massive doll collection. I lost count. Usually I can keep a pretty good estimate of how many of a thing that I'm throwing away just by how much space it takes up versus the size of the individual items. So until we got downstairs, we had thrown away probably 500 dolls and stuffed animals. We threw away at least that many, if not more, out of the downstairs. So there were certain ones that were really old that I was like, I don't know if this is worth anything or not. So I'd look it up and find out it's worth like $20. So in the trash it went. We found a bunch of jewelry too, but there was not one piece of jewelry with any actual precious metal. I can't even call them costume jewelry. They're more like dime store jewelry, that like stuff you buy at Walmart for $3 or at a garage sale for 50 cents. They also had a massive collection of VHS tapes and DVDs. And the thing is, and this is weird, I've never seen this in a house like this before, there wasn't really one DVD that was worth keeping. I mean, I wouldn't keep them anyway because I don't have a DVD player and also Netflix exists, but it was all B movies like Strike Force Commando, The Eye of the Sniper, like all these like B-rated action flicks that went straight to DVD. There were so many of those. Some had potential, like there was season 11 of Supernatural, but no other Supernatural DVDs, so that you couldn't even get the set. But it was mostly all these throwaway videos that nobody wanted, to the point where I thought maybe they had gone to a Blockbuster or a Family Video and just bought all the remaining videos that nobody else wanted. People were like, yeah, I'll pay you $50 if you take these out of my store. Though I will admit, they did have a copy of Happy Gilmore, so that was there. But everything else was just garbage. On the first video, I had some people get not mad, but a little upset that I threw away the lamps that look like Tiffany lamps. And it's like, no, I'm very good at distinguishing good stuff from bad stuff. And there were no Tiffany lamps in this house. There was nothing of real value in the house at all. The lamps that I threw away were fake stained glass that were more like a plastic than a glass. And they were bought through the Home Shopping Network. They had the original boxes they came in, and it was Home Shopping Network cheapo lamps. Or I'd hear things like, oh my God, I can't believe you threw away that table. That's from 1930 or 1940, and it's by this maker. And it's like, no, I look at all that stuff, dude. This was a Menards reproduction table. It was made in like 2004. It was meant to look like an old table, but it was not an old table. I can tell you this much. If you're ever watching these videos, especially myself, Ari Katarina, Clean with Barbie, and you get obsessed about the things we're throwing away, you're missing the entire point of the video. Like, these people have gotten themselves into such a bad position that the saving point of this is not to try to make money out of the stuff they have in their house, because the stuff they have in their house is covered with mouse poop and pee. It's covered in black mold and corrosion. Things are broken left and right. This is not a place that we can clean where we can take certain items and pick and choose which ones stay and which ones go, and meticulously sort out things and then set up the sale and then find paying customers and set up the pickup and drop off and all that. This is a case where the houses are so bad, things just have to go. The unfortunate reality of these situations is that the person throwing away the stuff isn't the problem. The problem was the person who had hoarding disorder to begin with, basically evicted themselves out of their own house by not being able to control that disorder. They didn't go to therapy. They didn't ask for help. They're in a fight or flight mode when their stuff is being messed with. It's a mental condition. It's a neuropsychological condition. Sometimes you'll see us throwing away things that do have actual value. And unfortunately, that's the end result of this disorder. We do not have the time or the resources to get rid of this stuff. And in this case, we're way out in the country, so it makes it even doubly hard. Ask people who live in rural areas how easy it is to get rid of stuff and to donate things and to sell things, or to even put things on the curb and have people take them. Because like out this far in the country, there's no curb. it's a house and then several miles of cornfields, then another house. But the point is, if you're looking through the things we're throwing away and getting upset because we're throwing certain items away, you might also have a problem because the point of these videos is to dig people out of this massive pit that they've buried themselves in. Okay, so when I started cleaning this furniture, there's going to be steps that we take on each one because these are filled with mouse poop. So the first step is to open up the drawers and vacuum out all the mouse poop using a vacuum that has a HEPA filter. That's a special type of filter that's designed to move really small particulates, including like bacteria and viruses and stuff like that. That way you're not vacuuming up mouse poop and then just shooting that saturated air back out into the room again. It's going through the filter first and collecting all the bad stuff and then shooting out clean air. Then I'm going to clean the outsides of all the furniture with Mr. Clean because these had so much crud and melted candy and just nasty sticky stuff on it that I needed something powerful. Otherwise, I would just use just a damp rag if you're doing like home cleaning. But if you're ever in a position where something's covered with a bunch of really nasty stuff, Mr. Clean's great. If you have melted candy or stickers or something on furniture, Goo Gone is really great. But I just use Mr. Clean on these. Anything that had super cruddy insides of the drawers, I would use Mr. Clean on as well, but there's a bunch of these drawers that are fine. It had mouse poop, but no actual crud. I'm then going to polish the outsides of the furniture with Old English. Liquid gold works really good too, and that's just to add a shine. Then the last thing I'm going to do is take straight 70% isopropyl alcohol. I'm putting in a spray bottle and putting that on mist, and I'm going to spray the insides of all those drawers, and I'm not going to wipe it up. The point of that is to not clean. It's to kill off any viruses or bacteria that may still be in the drawers. Alcohol evaporates so quickly that it won't damage the wood, but it will kill any of the viruses, bacteria, live moose, or whatever happens to be in the wood, and the whole point is just to make that safe. Now, the majority of this house is in really good shape, but the ceilings down here, and especially the flooring, is going to have to be replaced. So the downstairs has got a bunch of drop ceiling tiles that have fallen off or they've had damage over time. The floors, it's obvious. I mean, look at them. They're completely ruined. The carpet's going to need to be pulled up and they can either recarpet it or put down LVP or whatever, but that has to go. There's no cleaning that. I mean, I know a couple of YouTube channels that could. Some of those carpet cleaning channels are super awesome and they could take just about anything and make it look new again, but it's not worth it in this house. The carpet itself is old and outdated. I mean, dirt aside, and there's a lot of physical damage where it's unraveled. It just needs to be stripped, like your mom. Hi-oh! To give you an idea of how bad this actually was, most of the houses that we clean on this channel, we can complete the entire house in a week. We start filming on a Monday. By Friday, we finish up. By Saturday, the video's up. And this downstairs took us 5 days to do 4 rooms. That was a family room, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a walk-in closet. But down here, it was all just kind of scattered and piled on top of each other and interwoven between each little section of trash. But the thing that made it super hard was, since this is downstairs, it's built into the side of a hill, and there's one exit, and in order to get all the stuff out to the dumpster, we have to go out of a back door and then up a hill, and it's like 50 to 100 feet from the back door to the dumpster, and it's been raining this entire time. So the hill is just a swamp. It's all muddy, and trying to carry up, a 100-pound bag or a dolly worth of books, it's extremely difficult and it's physically taxing. So we had to do a thing where we would take a couple trips to the dumpster, then we would have to rest for like 10 minutes before we could dive back into it again because it just wrecks your legs and your back. I have a friend in the cleaning world that goes by the name Cleaning Fairy Cherie. It looks like Cleaning Fairy Sherry, which makes more sense as far as the rhyme scheme, but her name is pronounced Cherie. I didn't name her. She didn't name herself. Don't make fun of her. She's fine. She's fine. But she absolutely hates it whenever people use toilet cleaner to clean things that aren't toilets. So when people use it to clean showers or sinks or whatever. And in The grand scheme of things for regular everyday home cleaning, she is correct. It's not a good idea to use it on just regular everyday cleaning. However, she's never really done, as far as I know, a house that's in this bad of a condition, that is in hoarder condition. In these instances, I use toilet cleaner to get rid of hard water stains. And specifically, I use an acid-based toilet cleaner. You can tell that it's acid-based if it says something like removes calcium and lime deposits or hard water stains. This bathroom is absolutely covered in rust and some of the worst hard water deposits I've ever seen, specifically in the shower. So what I'm going to do in this case is scrape off as much of the hard water deposits as possible, and I'm just using an ice scraper that you keep in your car to like defrost the windshield, just one of those little plastic defroster things. Then once I've removed as much of that mechanically as possible, then I'm going to saturate the entire thing with that acid-based toilet cleaner and let it set for at least an hour. I wanted to talk about a question that I get a whole lot because I think the subject is really, really important, and that is at least a few times a week, I get emails from people saying, hey, my friend or my mom or my moose has a really severe hoarding problem. I don't know what to do about it anymore. How do I confront them? How do I help them? And I've never really dove into that subject in detail, and I think it's an important one because this is way more common than what you may think. And I think the very first thing that you have to understand is that this is treated much in the same way as an addiction. And I think that the first step in addressing this problem is not what do you do for them? It's what do you do for yourself? And that is understanding what hoarding disorder actually is. Like, for instance, you can't come to a friend and tell them you've got a problem with their addiction to alcohol if you don't understand that this isn't a choice that they're making, that this isn't just a matter of willpower. To understand that this is a mental disorder that needs to be overcome in many different ways and not just, hey, you should just stop drinking and then you'll be cured. That's not the way to handle it. That's not what alcoholism is. And it's the same thing with hoarding disorder. So you need to understand first that hoarding disorder is a disorder. It's a neuropsychological disorder. So there's a physical problem with the brain that has psychological outcomes, sort of side effects, if you will. In extremely simple terms, there are two lobes in the front of the brain. One deals with heavy emotional regulation, and the other deals with heavy decision making for like big decisions. And in a person who has hoarding disorder, those two lobes are kind of cross-wired a little bit, but they underneath a brain scan, they show extremely diminished activity. So it's why whenever you try to quote unquote fix a hoard for somebody, there will be a fight or flight response. They'll get extremely angry, or they'll say, well, you just deal with it. My feelings don't even matter, and then they'll just walk away. Hoarding disorder is not a matter of greed. There's an issue of control, and the actual hoarding is a symptom of the disorder. Now, because of that little quote-unquote crosswire, I just made little quotes in the air with my fingers, even though you can't see it. I did, though. You throwing away a book that they found at a garage sale could have the same exact emotional ramification as you throwing away their dog, or in some really severe cases like throwing away their child. It's a mental illness, and if you go into this not understanding that, you're going to do more harm than good. My suggestion before you even come to them offering help is to read up on hoarding disorder on Google and try to get the most recent information possible, because this is a disorder that's been studied since the 1940s, I think, and we're still learning new stuff about it all the time. For instance, if you find an old report, you'll find psychiatrists referring to this as a form of OCD, and it turns out it's not. It's its own standalone disorder. Anyway, understanding that is vital in order for you to help them. The second issue is you kind of have to go into this in the same way that you'd go into an intervention for addiction. Most of the people who have this disorder don't even realize there's a problem, in the same way that alcoholics don't realize there's a problem until they hit a rock bottom or they have something catastrophic happen in their lives to kind of wake them up to the fact that their addiction is harming more than just them. And so you can't just walk into the house and say, hey, your house looks like an absolute crap hole and this is disgusting disgusting and we need to clean this up. You need to get off your butt and start cleaning your house, and I'll help you doing that. That's more of an attack instead of a concern. And remember, control is a major, major issue with people who have hoarding disorder. So they're immediately going to push back and probably just kick you out of their life. Even if it's on a temporary basis, they're going to be like, get the hell out of my house. Who do you think you are? I'm living fine. I've never gotten sick. It's just stuff. So if you have a friend that you're concerned about, you need to kind of study up on the idea of interventions, because you're going to handle this with kid gloves. It's delicate. It's really, really delicate, and it's very difficult to find out how to come at them without sounding like you're accusing them of something or that you're blaming them. The way you're probably going to have to do it, depending on the personality of the person who you're going to help, is to wait for an opening. It is to go over to visit and wait for them to say, oh my God, my house, I'm so embarrassed about this. I got to clean this up this weekend. And even though you may have heard that 1,000 times, which is really, really common with hoarding disorder, that would be your window to jump in and go, oh yeah, that's cool. I was looking for something to do on Friday. I'll come over and help. We can put on some music and gab and clean up the kitchen. It'll be fun. However, more times than not, it's not that simple. Most of the times it has to be handled by phrasing it as, hey, I'm really concerned about the condition of the house. This is no longer just clutter. This has got some problems that pose health risks. I can't come over here while it's in this condition, and I sure can't bring my kids over. And that is really important whenever you're dealing with older people who are in this situation, because oftentimes it's a case of them wanting to see their grandkids and having the parent put their foot down and say, I'm really sorry, but I can't bring my kids into this. It's not healthy. It's not normal. We need to talk about getting whatever we need to do to get you back into shape. If that means us cleaning, that's great. If it means hiring somebody, if it means getting you therapy. So the whole idea of this is to get them to recognize that there is a problem to begin with. One thing that you need to keep in mind whenever tackling this is, are you okay with them resenting you? Because there's a very, very good chance that they're going to. They're going to be offended that you even brought it up to begin with. And then once you actually get into the cleaning, they're going to be very angry if you throw even one simple, ridiculous item in the trash. Almost all hoards begin with something being taken away from the person who has the disorder. It's almost always a parent, a spouse, a child, a really important career, a bad divorce, something that was out of their control. A death in the family it's almost always a death in the family, but something out of their control that took something very, very special away from them. The hoard starts out as kind of a dopamine fix. It's a band-aid for a much, much bigger wound. And every time they buy something cool, or they find a really good sale, or they find a really expensive collectible item, that gives them a big giant hit of dopamine that makes them feel happy. Then they'll come back home, set it on the table, and they'll move on to the next dopamine hit. In almost every hoarded house that I've ever cleaned, and I've cleaned close to 300 at this point, they don't even know half of this stuff even exists in the house. It's not about the item itself, it's about the dopamine hit while buying it. Then if you try to take that thing away from them, even if it has no value whatsoever, that's when you get the pushback, because you're interjecting yourself into their life and into their happiness and removing something from them. That's why the control is so important to somebody with hoarding disorder, because they're fighting back against life that has taken something very, very important from them. So now anything that's taken from them is considered a huge offense. Another thing to expect is that they're going to assign a value, whether sentimental or monetary, to every single item that they have. Money-wise, we'll give Longaberger baskets as an example. Almost everybody who collects them thinks that they're worth a lot of money. In reality, almost all Longaberger baskets that are mid-sized are worth about $10, $20 if they're in completely mint condition, and if they're special in some way. Most of them are about $10 to $15. But to a collector, they think these things are worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars. They're just not. Large, special, rare Longaberger baskets can be worth something, but the odds of them having that specific type of a basket is pretty rare. I've only found a couple of them in 300 houses. But in every one of these videos where I throw away Longaberger baskets, I get people even in the comments who are upset because I've thrown these things away. If you go to eBay eBay, you'll find people trying to scam you out of money for Longaberger and increasing the value by 5 times what it's actually worth. But if you really dive in and start doing the research, in general, almost all Longaberger baskets are almost worthless. So you can take a single $5 basket from a person who has hoarding disorder, throw it in the trash, and they will think that you just thrown away a $200 basket. Potential is another thing you're going to run into a lot, and this can be highly frustrating to somebody who's trying to help someone with hoarding disorder. You'll find a massive amount of craft supplies or cardboard boxes that have just been sitting there for years, and you know they're never going to get used, so you try to pare them down or donate them or throw them away, and the person with hoarding disorder will say things like, oh, no, don't throw that away. I was going to make a Moose Puncher 5000 out of that. And you know for a fact that that's never going to happen. These were craft supplies that were under a mountain of other garbage that's been sitting there for 10 years, but you cannot convince them that it's junk because in their mind, these objects have a use and they have a potential. Even though that potential is never going to be realized and it's never going to come to fruition, it still exists in their head, and throwing those things away is like throwing an artistic masterpiece away. That to me is the most frustrating thing when dealing with somebody who has hoarding disorder, because I'm trying to help them and they're trying to prevent me from gifting them space. So there's oftentimes I will have to ask them, what do you value more? This $5 purse that you found at a garage sale or the space that it occupies? No, don't throw that VHS copy of Beverly Hills Cop away because it's worth $100. So you look it up and find out it's worth $3 to $7 and they still won't believe it. So you have to say, what do you value more? This VHS copy of Beverly Hills Cop when you don't even have a VCR and it already exists on streaming services? Or do you value your mental and physical health more? And that may sound like a dumb trade-off if you're just talking about a single object. I mean, just let them have the stupid tape. But when you're talking about thousands of objects, then it's a whole different deal, because in bulk, these things are providing housing for mice, roaches, spiders. They're providing protection and shelter. In every instance, in every single hoarder house that I've ever done on this channel, when you have a mountain of trash like this, even if it's not garbage, even if it's just items, by the time we get down to the bottom of it, the floor is covered in mouse poop and mouse urine. The only way to get past it is to get rid of some stuff, and I mean a lot of stuff. So what does that mean for you? It means that you have to be picky with your battles. There are some things you're going to have to give up on and say, all right, fine. They want to keep the crafting supplies. Let's keep some crafting supplies, but we're going to have to get rid of other things in return. Like I'll sacrifice a little bit of this stuff if it means we can get rid of other stuff. So maybe you find yourself having to convince them or come to a compromise that, okay, we can keep a bunch of craft stuff. That's totally fine. But do you really need this much of it? Can we get rid of 20% of it, 30% of it? In most hoarder homes, you need to get rid of 90. But any thinning, any culling is better than no thinning. Another thing to prepare yourself for is that there's going to be some heartbreaking stuff, and it's going to be in the oddest places. So for instance, I once cleaned a guy's kitchen. His wife had passed away in the late 1990s, and there were a whole bunch of jars of homemade salsa in the kitchen, and they were marked, I don't even remember, 1998, 1999, something like that. And I had to text him to ask, because I was cleaning without him being there, but I had to text him and say, is it okay to throw these away? And it took him quite a bit to finally say, yes, it's fine, because that was the last thing that his wife canned before she passed away. So yeah, the stuff has gone rancid, it's rotten, but it has a sentimental value to it, even though it shouldn't have, just because that was the last thing she had made before passing. And logically, you can't really keep stuff like that. It's dangerous. But just hearing those types of stories and finding the things that you're going to find in these houses can kind of affect you emotionally over time. You'll discover a sort of domestic archeology whenever you're uncovering these layers, and you can find the exact point in which things snapped, in which they got out of control. So for instance, in one house I cleaned, the woman had her kids taken away from her way early in life. And as we got down to the bottom layer of stuff, that's when we started finding kid stuff, toys, little shoes, bottles, pacifiers. So that would have been the first layer of things that were messy. And then after the kids were taken away, that's when her brain broke. And that's where you start finding clothes on the floor that cover up the kids' stuff, then just trash and garbage and McDonald's bags and just roaches. And you can see it layer by layer piling up to where they just gave up. In many cases where I'm helping someone with hoarding disorder, when I get down to that bottom layer, I will often find a whole bunch of medical paperwork that, announcing that they have cancer, insurance papers for cancer and chemo treatments, doctor's instructions on how to deal with nausea, and that's all the bottom layer of stuff. And you can tell that's where it started because they laid those things on the floor. Then after the person passed away, then the person who's left just gives up, and then it becomes a mound of trash on top of that. So as you go further down the piles in the hoard, you go further back in time until you find a definitive date when everything started. If you're even the tiniest bit sensitive, that can take a toll on you. And then you have to imagine what the person is going through, the person that you're helping. If it's making you this sad and this emotional and you're just an outsider, imagine what the person who lives there is going through as you're rooting through all this stuff. One thing that I don't think many people expect, but it is a truth, is that once you're allowed to help, once they really let you in and let you start helping clean up their house, they assign a certain amount of safety to you. And when that happens, they will unleash their trauma like opening a dam. As you're going through the stuff, they will notice what you're picking up, and there will be a story behind most of the stuff that you're grabbing. So you may grab a toy globe, and they will tell you the story about how their daughter got that for their granddaughter, and that, they'll give you the whole story of how that object came to be where it is and the meaning behind it, no matter how insignificant the object might be. And as they do that, they get more and more comfortable, and then they'll start talking about the trauma that led to this stuff, even if they don't know that's what they're doing. They will say, about that time is when my husband died, and God, he'd gone through cancer for so long, and then they'll just start trauma dumping. And this is their kind of release valve, and a lot of people can't take it. I've got people who have really big cleaning channels who had to just straight up take breaks because they couldn't handle the amount of trauma that they heard during every single house cleaning. Logistically, the thing that you have to worry about the most when helping somebody with this disorder is the physical cost of trash removal. Some places have a dump where you can just take your stuff to the dump and that's that. But for instance, in this house that we're doing in this video, we're up to dumpster number 7. We will end up doing 10 dumpsters in total by the time we're done. And that will be roughly about $8,000 for the cheapest set of dumpsters we can find. They're about $800 each for 40-yard dumpsters. But even if you can't go that route and you're finding other ways to get rid of the trash, it is going to be expensive. People often comment that I must spend a lot of money on cleaning supplies for these houses, and I do, but it doesn't even come close to how much we spend on actual dumpsters and trash removal. Here's something hypocritical of me to say. When you're doing this stuff, you're going to want masks and you're going to want gloves. I have been guilty of not wearing those, and it's really dumb to not wear them. I would suggest wearing an N95 mask. That's really good at protecting against viruses and bacteria and just a lot of the particulates that get kicked up into the air, because even if you're not dealing with something toxic, once you go down to the bottom of the pile and you reach the floor, it's like a bag of chips where all the small particles settle on the bottom. And as you pick up trash and clothes and stuff, it's going to kick those particles up into the air. And again, even if it's not toxic, the next day you're going to wake up and you're going to feel like you have a full-blown cold because you're going to be nonstop coughing. When you combine that with mouse droppings and roaches and whatnot, now you're dealing with the potential for hantavirus. If the person who you're helping thinks that you're overreacting and gets offended by that, which sometimes does happen, the way I handle it is I just tell them, I've got sensitive lungs and it's the dust. I just do this because if not, I'll be coughing like crazy. I have to do it even in my own house. I've had a few houses where I've had to wear full-blown Tyvek suits and respirators, and it always embarrasses the person who I'm helping laughing because it looks like I'm a sci-fi scientist trying to like protect myself against a world-ending virus. And I always tell them, yeah, it's just a safety thing because I do these every week. If I was doing just one of these houses, it wouldn't be as bad. But because I do this every single week, I have to be super safe because I'm always exposed to stuff. Yes, what I'm telling them is little white lies, but I'd rather just do that to avoid their embarrassment because they are going to be embarrassed. Another big thing you're going to run into is that either you or the person you're helping is going to want to donate some stuff because they still see value in it. If the place is covered in mouse poop and mouse pee, if there's black mold, if the clothes that you're picking up are stained or rough looking in any way, you can't donate them. The places you're going to try to donate them to will not take them. You'll have the best of intentions in trying to donate those, but not only will it multiply the amount of time that you're spending on these places by about 5 to 10, you're also going to basically be dumping garbage at a donation center. Then they have to go throw all that stuff into their own dumpster. So you're just passing garbage onto a place that, even though it's well-meaning and good intentioned, doesn't actually help anyone and in fact causes somebody else way more work. People who work in donation centers, please feel free to speak up in the comments and let the people know what you've had to deal with as far as donations from hoarder houses. Two things that you're going to want to consider investing in whenever you're cleaning up a place like this is 4mm trash bags. They're contractor bags, or lawn and leaf bags work as well. I use 40-gallon bags, and a huge tip whenever you're filling these bags, don't fill the bags by volume, fill them by weight. Most of these bags I'm only filling halfway up. And the reason is because you're going to look at a 40-gallon bag and you're going to say, man, I could fit a whole bunch of stuff in there. So you fill it to the top, then you tie it off. Then when you go to lift it, you realize you can't even lift it because it's 150 to 200 pounds. So I always fill the bags, and then about halfway, I will lift it. And if it's too heavy to lift, I stop. Or if it's getting too heavy to lift, I stop, tie it off, and then that's that. Even if it's only a quarter of the way full or half of the way full. The reason I use 40 gallons is because they usually come in boxes of 30 to 40, and they're really thick and really strong. Do not get the knockoff Dollar General type bags because you'll run into what I run into every time, where 5 or 6 of the bags will just split down the side because they're cheap. And if you're dealing with a house where the person still lives here, because like in this video, the person no longer lives here, this is an empty house, you'll want to get some tubs, but only get like 5, because you're going to think, well, I can get 20 or 30, which is going to be expensive to begin with. But as you're going through their stuff, you're going to run into more boxes and more tubs that you can use in their house. So I always start out with 5. And then as I'm packing things away and as I'm stacking up their stuff and organizing it, more tubs become available. Then if I need more, I can always go get more. But for the most part, if I start out with 5 or 6, that's typically all I'll need because things make themselves available the more you clean. I think the most important thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is that, yes, it is highly, highly likely that it's going to get back into this condition again, but you can't consider that a waste of effort. Hoarding disorder is a disorder, and it has about the same relapse rate as alcoholism or drug addiction. It's about a 90 to 95% relapse rate. There is every chance that you're going to spend a month cleaning up a house or a couple weeks cleaning it up, and then by the time you're done, it's going to look so great, and then you'll come over a month later and it will already be getting back into that condition again. 2, 3, 4 months later, it'll be hoarded right back the way it was before. I cannot stress enough, it is a disorder. People ask me about that all the time. Aren't you mad? Aren't you afraid that it's going to get back into that condition? Do you ever go back and check these places out again? And my response to that is always, no, I don't go back to the places. No, it doesn't make me mad that it's going to get into that condition again. Yes, I'm positive it will get into that condition again, but if I was able to give them even 2 weeks worth of peace and living in a really clean, safe environment, to me, that's worth the effort. Most of the time, they're going to need serious counseling and therapy in order to get past this and learn to live in a safe, productive way. Most of the time, the people who have hoarding disorder will not take that therapy. And one last piece of advice, and in fact, this isn't even advice, this is a rule. Never, ever go into the house of a person with hoarding disorder and just start cleaning. This disorder is powerful, and there are documented cases where people have gone into somebody's house while they were in the hospital or on vacation or just away from the house for a week or two, cleaned it all up, and then that person who they helped severely and or permanently harmed themselves. If you're going into one of these situations and you're truly wanting to help somebody, you cannot go into it with blame. You cannot go into it thinking that they're just being greedy or selfish. You can't go into it thinking that they're just lazy. If you think any of those things, you're not helping, you're a part of the problem. You cannot help somebody in this situation unless you understand what they're going through. You would not go to a heroin addict and think, I'm going to go ahead and get them off of this addiction and then just get rid of all their heroin. It's not the way it works. They need professional help. They need somebody to help them through the bad times. And if you're the type of person who is thinking, well, she's just lazy, she won't get off her ass and actually clean, then you should not be helping. You don't understand what's going on and you are going to make it worse. However, I hear from children of hoarders all the time who have a very difficult time showing empathy for their parents who have this disorder because it's such a self-centered disorder. There's a very bad control element. And I don't talk about it a lot because when you do that, you kind of open the door for people to dogpile on and just start hating on the person with the disorder. And I never want that to happen. But the reality here is that this disorder affects more than just the person who has it. It affects everybody who lives with them in an extremely negative way. I see this story all the time where the person who has the disorder passes away and either they think they're leaving their kids a massive inheritance that they can sell off, which is never the case. It's almost always worthless items. Or more importantly and more common, they leave them with an $8,000 trash bill. Because that's what this costs to actually get the trash removed from this place, was 10 dumpsters at $800 a piece. In this case, when the mother passed away, the rest of the family just had to leave. They just had to leave this stuff in the house because it's too much for the normal, average, everyday person to handle. It's too expensive. It's too toxic. And trust me, we looked up many, many items because we thought that they might have some value that we could recoup for the family. There was nothing in here that was worth anything. Even the quote-unquote antiques that you'll see us taking out of the big barn or the big garage, they're absolutely worthless. The other piece of advice I'd like to give is something I don't really mention that often, but I really should, is that you're not going for perfect, you're going for good enough. So you don't have to take every single last thing out of a place like this, but you need to get it clear enough to where it's at least livable. It's at least usable. But above all else, the thing that I would stress the most is remember while you're cleaning this stuff, you're dealing with a mental illness. You're not dealing with laziness. You're not dealing with greed. You're not dealing with sloth, unless a sloth lives there, like an actual animal type sloth. But I've only ran into that like twice. It's probably going to make you mad as you're cleaning it. You're going to run into things that make you frustrated and angry and just, I don't know, it puts you on edge. There's going to be things that you find that are emotionally devastating. You're going to find stuff that just outright makes you sad. If the person you're helping is still alive and living in the place, you have to go into it knowing that there's a very good almost certainty that it's going to get back into this condition again. You're going to deal with family members who are so fed up that they just stop talking and the family ruptures and splits. If they do help, you're going to hear them get into arguments. This is never a case of just being able to walk in, clean up the mess, and then the problem's solved. That's not the way this works. Still, this is so difficult to deal with, especially if you're a family member or a sibling of a person who needs this type of help, that even knowing this when you go into it, you're still like, I don't care. I've gotten to the point to where the mental illness, I no longer have empathy for it. All I see is a person who chose their stuff over their kids. I hear that weekly. And to be honest, from an outside eye, it's easy for us to look in and say, well, you have to be empathetic. You know that this is out of their control. But unless you live through it, you don't know what they're going through because this was forced upon them. And everyone has a real human breaking point. Anyway, all that aside, we are done with this house. It took us 5 weeks. Again, it took us 10 40-yard dumpsters. And now we're moving on to the next house. Thanks for watching. Members, I will see you this Wednesday. Everyone else, I'll see you next weekend. Later.